Hey, good evening, everybody. It's yours truly, Johnny Belize, and welcome to the first episode of Together We Served. And I have the honor of interviewing today Pete Henkels.
How you doing, everybody?
So, Pete, where are you from?
I am from the fighting city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
So, what
As
what
my as my sister will tell you, I grew up out in the suburbs.
is that? Is that an Eagles thing you have up there?
Why, yes, Johnny Belize, that is an Eagles thing I have up there.
Let's take. I got to see this. I got to see this. Let's show all
So
the people.
so I make these uh, out of wood and
Nice,
epoxy and everything else. And I'm working on a Phillies one over there in the corner. So that's my next one to hang up.
very
So
cool,
hopefully, if I get that done, they'll make the playoffs and hopefully the World Series this year.
very cool. Hey, you never know, right? But I wanted to thank you for coming in today and sharing some time with us. As you know, I do a lot of interviews, and I said, you know what are we missing here? We got to get the veterans involved with this. I think it's a good series to sit down and talk about our men and women who took the time and devoted their time and their lives to help defend our country. So
Proud to be here.
so Pete, what branch of the service were you in?
United States Army. Before we get started, I would like to thank all the men and women out there who have served and who are serving. Anyone that's ever laced up a pair of boots, threw on a pair of dog tags, or picked up a rifle for this country. I want to thank all of you, each and every one of you. And I want to just start off with just saying that real quick.
Awesome, and I'm sure everybody watching is going to appreciate this. So what branch of the service were you in?
I was in the U.S. Army. I was an engineer.
Okay, and I hear a lot of people talk about as for Army is it MOS? Is that what you guys call it?
Correct.
And,
Yes. MOS, Military Occupational Skill. And so when I first joined, I joined as a combat engineer, and that's landmine warfare, explosives, booby traps, Bangalore torpedoes, things like that. And after I did that for 3 years, I went back to school, changed my job to be a heavy equipment operator slash truck driver.
so they have. I know the Army. You guys have codes for that. It's called something Bravos.
Yep. So my combat engineering designator was 12 Bravo. And then when I reclassed to be a heavy equipment operator, that was called 62 Echo.
So for us Navy guys, we're like we just shake our heads.
Right. Well, it's like us Army guys trying to figure out y'all's rank and uniforms. But
Yeah.
what's funny, John, is I actually deployed with the Navy Seabees to Bosnia back in 1998. And I think, yeah, they were with us in Kosovo in 99 as well. So I worked alongside the Seabees.
I mean, how was the work ethic?
It was, those guys were great. I love the Army. Okay, if you ask me, I will tell you the Army's the best branch. I have to. You have to have branch loyalty. Love all the branches, but the Army's the best. But I got to tell you, the Seabees were much better heavy equipment operators than we were, than the most of us were, and their Master Chief kept trying to get me to leave the Army and join the Navy.
Uh, for
So I thought that was funny.
for the record, and everybody watching this, I'm a veteran myself, United States Navy. So don't think at all that I'm trying to mock the Navy. I'm just trying to have a little fun with the episode here.
Nope, I got love for all the branches, and you don't really get to see how united we all are. You don't get to see how important every branch, every MOS is until something bad happens.
Mhm.
And then when something really bad happens, it's like the men and women in uniform are at their best. When the
Right,
situation's at its worst, I've seen our men and women in uniform be at their best.
right, right. No, I agree. I agree. I agree. Like they say, when shit hits the fan, you know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
I'm assuming you're in high school when you started figuring out, hey, I don't know if college is my thing. It might be military. How did that all play out?
So it's really weird. I actually growing up, I always wanted to be a fighter pilot. I always thought that Top Gun, all those things, that was just awesome. Uh, but some I don't remember because it was like 8 million years ago. But to be honest with you, if memory serves me correct, my senior year, beginning of my senior year, the Army recruiter got to me first. I knew I didn't know anything. I was 18 years old. Okay. We think we know everything at that age, but I didn't know anything. And I was smart enough to know I didn't know anything. And I knew if I went to college with all my friends, I would just drink and party for 4 years and get nothing but debt out of it. So I knew I needed some sort of discipline and direction. And I wanted to get the heck out of Downingtown, Pennsylvania. So I joined the delayed entry program without telling anyone. And I joined the Army under the conditions. If I graduated high school on time, they would ship me off to basic training. So I did my part. I graduated high school and they did their part and shipped me out to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
So let's go back into when you're going into boot camp. I know. So you're going to the MEP station, and I'm sure there's other guys with you there. Did anybody from I guess Downingtown? Did anybody, not specifically that you knew them, but from the area? Hey, how you doing? I'm from Downingtown, and you guys go into boot camp together?
So of one of the seniors in my high school, I didn't know him very well at the time, but I did know him. Dan Geyer was his name. He joined the military the same time I did. So we joined the same time, but I can't remember if we didn't have the same MOS. So we went to different places, but I don't even know if we left at the same time either. I can't remember. When I joined the Army, I was in what's called combat arms. There's combat MOSs like your infantry, your artillery, your tanks, your combat engineers, and their jobs are to do the fighting. And that's what I signed up for my first 3 years.
So you get sworn in, and I guess they're getting ready to load you guys up on the bus, take you on the airplane wherever you guys are heading. At what point during all that are you starting to think, man, what the hell did I just do?
So pretty much the whole time. I can tell you, for me, I can't speak for anybody else, but for me, it was I had anxiety like the whole time. Like I'd never been away from home before. I was like, "What are you doing?" Like you could have done something. Like I don't know if this is right, but it seemed all pretty relaxed. It seemed pretty cool, and I was like, it was an adventure. So I was down. I was cool, and we reported to Fort Leonard Wood, and my group that I reported with, we got there like a week early before our basic started. So we were in these like temporary holding barracks, I guess you would call them. And we were just basically chillaxing for a week. And I was like, man, this is cool, like, okay, this is pretty neat, like everybody's nice. Everybody's really relaxed, everybody's cool to you. Like this isn't gonna be bad at all. And then the day that our class started, I think five or six cattle trucks pulled up outside the barracks we were staying in, the temporary barracks, and actual cattle trucks, like tractor trailer cattle trucks where you herd cattle in, right? And so they file us all into these trucks. Everything at this point is still pretty calm, but I'm like, this is a cattle truck. We're not cattle. Um, they filed us in, and then I remember a drill sergeant jumped up. This is the first time we met our drill sergeants. Like we haven't seen them yet, right? So I remember our drill sergeant that got on our cattle truck. He addressed us and he was really nice, really cool. He was like, "Hey, on behalf of the United States Army and the United States government and Fort Leonard Wood, we'd like to welcome you, to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. On behalf of the drill sergeants of Alpha Company 35th Engineers, we'd like to say," and then he just flipped a switch. It was like you just turn on a light switch and he became Lucifer. Like he instantly became probably the scariest human being I've ever met in my life. And it was at that point I was like, why am I here?
Mm-hmm.
And so, that was like a big reality check, big it was what I needed, but I didn't realize how hard you know what I mean? Like you ever get yourself into something and you didn't realize it was that intense until you did it. Well, that it was one of those things. I look back now, So when I was going through it, it was one of the hardest events I ever went through because when you go through, we went through what's called OSET training because we were combat arms. So our basic training and our advanced individual training, usually in the Army, you do basic, you graduate basic, and you might even go to another base camp to do your advanced individual training, and it's much more laxed. They treat you more like a soldier. They treat you more, like a human being. Not for us. We had the same exact drill sergeants, the same exact bunk bed. So basically, my basic training was 4 months long. And at the time, it was, you know, I remember when they would shut the lights off at night and everything would be quiet. Everything was pitch dark. Everybody's in the racks, and you would hear it. You would hear it, and it would start maybe like a half hour after lights out. You would start to hear sniveling.
Yeah.
Grown men crying,
Yeah.
and I guilty. You're missing your girlfriend. You're missing your hell. You miss food. Everything. So I thought there were quite a few times I wanted to quit. The only reason I didn't quit is because half the people in my hometown said I'd never make it.
Mhm.
And that was actually my driving force to get me to stick. And I'm so glad I did. And I look back on that time now, John, that was some of the funnest times
Yeah.
I ever had in my life was basic training. I wish I could be younger and go through it again, knowing now what I knew, it would be so much more, it would be so much different. It was so much fun. And the drill sergeants were some of the best professional, highly intelligent, trained men I've ever met in my life.
Being the host of the show, I don't ever get a chance to answer the questions myself, and I can tell you this, and I would bank a lot of people say this. Probably, if I was to ask the question, and what you answered, what would be the hardest part about boot camp? It was probably the first night because I remember I reported to San Diego 30 or San Diego, and I remember they called it like an earthquake drill, and I guess our COs had something to do, and they told us to go lay under our racks. And I think I cried myself to sleep, honest to God. And I think after that, after I got that cry out and I got, settled in and like, okay, this is what we got to do. I think the rest of it was pretty cool. Everything pretty much fell in line.
So knowing what I know now, you know, their job is to break you.
Mhm.
Everybody breaks, but not everybody breaks at the same time.
Mhm.
And the ones that break earlier actually have a better time, an easier time, I
Yeah.
think, than the tough guys like me that took so long to break. Like it actually, but you're right. And I attribute it to it's like that first cry. They broke you.
Mhm.
And now that because once they break you, now it's about building you back up. It's no longer a bunch of animals trying to tear you down anymore. Now it becomes, okay, we got them. Now we need to build him back up in our image. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
again, when you're 18, you don't know this stuff. I showed up to basic training with 4 cartons of cigarettes. I didn't even know you couldn't smoke, you know? And I had like a big bottle of scope. And I remember my drill sergeant picked it up out of my bag. And he's like, "What's this, private?" And I was like, "Mouthwash." And he kicked it. I mean, he must have punted that thing. I didn't know you could punt scope that far. And it just shattered. And he's like, "It's contraband. It has alcohol in it." And I'm like, "Who drinks scope?" Like, I wasn't going to drink it. It's
Yeah.
from my, you know. So my first day of basic training is when I learned I was quitting smoking as well.
Mhm.
So you throw that on there too, and it's hard.
So how long is Army? Well, I'm assuming it's probably the same. How long is Army basic training?
It's 12 weeks.
Now, what
I don't.
part of that?
It was 12 weeks. I don't know now. That back in 1994, it was 12 weeks.
So what would have been your favorite part of boot camp, and what would have been your least favorite part?
So my least favorite part was probably hmm, uh at the time, probably the gas chamber was my least favorite desirable thing that I ever been through in my life. Um, it's amazing what you can get used to. 10 years later, the gas chamber doesn't bother me at all now, but back then I thought I was going to die. My favorite was the guys around me. You were being pushed. The one thing I loved about my drill sergeants, basic training in general, is I learned who I was. I thought I was tough when I joined the Army, but I would never have pushed myself as far as they pushed me. I would have never known my limits. You know, I remember we were on a 12-mile road march and coming back out of the field in the middle of the night, and I fell asleep on the road march and walked right into a tree, dead
Yeah.
asleep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know. They used to, you know, in the Army, you have a battle buddy. And so, like, when you set up your tent, he has one half of the tent, you have the other half of the tent. And he has three poles, and you have three poles. And he has three stakes, you have three stakes. So you put your stuff together and you make one A-frame tent that two bodies can fit in, barely, but you fit in there. And our drill sergeants used to 100-mile-an-hour tape gas canisters to broom handles, and they would pull the pin and stick it in our tents and fill it with gas. And 2 o'clock in the morning, you're stone cold asleep, and next thing you know, you're waking up to gas in your face, trying to find your mask. And
Mm-hmm.
at the time, you're thinking, this is the worst my life could ever possibly be.
Yeah.
Why am I here? Everybody hates me. Like, why don't they just hurry up and kill me? Because I know that's
Yeah.
what they're trying to do. But you look back on it, man, and it it defines who you are. It makes you like, it pushes you harder than you ever push yourself. So I liked that too, like being pushed way harder than I would have ever pushed myself.
So you're at the end of boot camp, guys are graduating. One of the most things you always think you're going to do is you're always going to stay in touch with a lot of the guys that you want the boot camp, and obviously guys all go in different directions. Has any of the guys that you went to boot camp with actually go to your duty station? And where was your duty station?
So my first duty station was Fort Hood, Texas. And I remember being in formation and them calling out our duty assignments. And me being from Philadelphia, I have never been to Texas, nor did I have any desire to go to Texas because that's the same state that the Dallas Cowboys reside. So I wanted nothing to do with Texas. And they called out my name. And of course, the drill sergeants know everything about you. So they all know I'm from Philly. They used to call me Philly. And they said, Fort Hood, Texas. And they started laughing. And I was like, drill sergeant, I can't go to, like, I'll go to Korea. Like, I was actually trying to change my orders for Korea, which is a hardship. But I was like, I'll go to Korea instead of Texas. Like, and no, you're going to Texas. But like 20 of us ended up going to Fort Hood, Texas, or 30, I know 30 of us, something like that. But Fort Hood at the time had over 44,000 troops on it and two major tank divisions.
Mhm.
So we all reported at the same time, but half of them went to First Cav, and the other half, like me, went to Second Armored Division. And then when the half of us that went to Second Armored Division, we got split up into different companies, but three or four of us, no, four of us ended up in the same company.
Wow.
Which was very helpful. Again, I'd never been to Texas, man.
Yeah.
I never heard they had drive-in beer barns. Like, you can drive your car in there and get alcohol. Like, I'd never seen anything like that before. They sell beer in the grocery stores. I'm like, what the hell? Texas
Wow.
is actually pretty cool.
So you finally get to your duty station. Um, what was your first deployment?
My first deployment,
I don't mean that to be exact date, but when you guys got deployed, I mean, were you guys like sent into action? I mean, what was that
I
like?
never deployed as a combat engineer to anywhere other than Southern California. We had a 45-day field rotation to Fort Irwin, which is Death Valley, where we do desert warfare training. But when I was in that unit in Texas, we would go to the field all the time. We would go to the field for 45 days all the time. Like, we just stayed in the field. And that's why I hated that job, because like
Yeah.
we were always training. I look back on it and it was some of the best training in the world, but still, it's nice to have a day off every now and then too, you know?
Oh,
So
absolutely.
I deployed my first real deployment, I would say, was I re-enlisted in Fort Hood to change my job. I told my re-enlistment NCO, I said, hey, he came to me and he's like, hey, are you re-enlisting? And I was like, well, I'll re-enlist if I could change my job. And he's like, that's impossible because you're a combat engineer and there's a shortage of combat engineers because nobody wants to do that job. So there's a shortage, so you can't change. I said, okay, then I'm just going to get out. And I thought that's the way it was going to be. And like 2 months later, Sergeant Barkfeld came back to me and he's like, hey, man, I got great news. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I got you. Not only did I get you a school date to change your MOS to heavy equipment operator like you wanted, you're also going to Germany. And I was like, are you kidding me? And he's like, no, you're going to Germany. Pack your shit. I was like, fantastic. All right. So I went to Germany and I got to Germany in, I want to say 99 ish, 98 ish, 98 ish, probably. And I deployed to Bosnia for 6 months. And that was rough. That was a peacekeeping mission. Like it wasn't violent, but the job I had to do there was, it was not what I expected or we expected. We did some things that we weren't trained for.
Right. Yeah, we don't have to
So,
touch on that kind of stuff. I get you.
well, I don't mind, and I'll tell you why, John. I think I think the more guys like me can tell our story, I hope maybe the less people will glamorize it.
Mhm.
You know, I have a love hate relationship with Hollywood for that reason. I love that Hollywood tells our stories, but I hate how they tell them. They kind of romanticize wars, and there's nothing romantic about war, and nobody ever really wins a war. Anyone that fights it anyway, the best you can do is accomplish your objectives or your mission, but everybody loses. So my I don't know what you would want to call my awakening to that side of the house was when we went to Bosnia to clear minefields and things like that. So I was ready to do things like that. But the UN called us up and there was a guy named Slobodan Milosevic back then who committed genocide towards the Albanians, massacred thousands and tens of thousands of Albanians. And so they had a mass grave that they wanted to exhume to prove Milosevic, you know, to try him in The Hague. And so we got called to go out there with the UN because the top of the grave was mined. It was booby trapped with mines. So I took an armored bulldozer and I cleared the top of it off. And then the UN was supposed to exhume the bodies and deal with all that. But they said since we were there, they would like us to help.
Yeah.
So I had to help exhume the grave. And that was, I was pulling 7 year olds out of a
Yeah.
mass grave at
Yeah.
21, 22 years old.
Yeah. And that's the side of the military, like you said, Hollywood doesn't show. Well, they may.
Yeah.
Yeah, they may, but it's to a human being, it's not cool. You know what I mean?
It's
It's war and
and
death and
you know, 21 years old, John, you're a kid.
yeah,
I don't care what they call you, you're a kid.
yeah,
You know, and I still struggle with that. I still see the faces and the smells and things like that. So I struggle with that, you know. It and the other thing I struggled with is as I'm pulling these bodies out, I'm looking around at my men and our weapons and our vehicles and the UN and all their weapons. And I'm like, man, if we would have been here, we could have stopped this.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like these are just farmers.
right,
They're not fighters. They're you know what I mean? Like Milosevic literally called them outside of town. All the men in this town had to go to a mandatory meeting in this farmhouse outside of town. All the men between the ages of 7 and 70, and he just massacred all of
yeah.
them. And that's who was in the grave.
That's the tough part. So let me ask you this, Pete. with everything that you've been through, knowing or everything that you've been through, knowing not knowing what you would have got, would you have still went into the service knowing what you were coming up against?
Absolutely. Yes, I would have,
And
because it taught me a lot. I think that you can't appreciate what you have here until you see atrocities over there.
mhm.
You know,
Now,
um, it gives you a more sense of what's important. You know what I mean? So no, I don't. My regrets are not mine. They're the regrets of the people above me that put me in situations we should not have been in.
mhm,
Those are the regrets I have, but they're not mine to carry. I did
right,
my job. I did what I was asked to do, and I never, no matter how scared I was, I never ran. You know,
yeah,
so I have that, and I met a lot of great friends, and it it made me who I am today.
yeah.
You know,
So a lot of things people say, and I even, well, uh, our bear wants to go into the Marines, and I've been telling him like, look, you want to do something in the military that you can revert back to the real life. When you everything that you learned in the military, is that what you do now in the real world?
some of it doesn't transfer, but some of it does. So in my military, I don't know about today's military. I hear rumors. I don't know what it's like today. But my military, we were brash. We were what you would consider harsh. And I try to tone that down when dealing with my job and, things that I do, because people just don't understand, you know, like the F word in the military is a noun, really, and it's socially not acceptable to. So the biggest thing is your language. You have to clean it up, and you have to almost civilize yourself somewhat. But a lot of it translates, the sense of duty, responsibility. Where I've been working now, I've been there almost 7 years and haven't been late once. I have so much sick days and vacation days saved up. I could take the next 85 days off, and that's just, you don't call out sick in the military. You don't,
Yeah.
you know, you go to sick call, they give you 800 milligrams of Motrin until you get back to work.
Mhm. So is
That's it.
anybody out there that I'm sure you might have said, hey, look, I'm doing this thing for veterans, this and that. Is there anybody that might watch this? You might want to give a shout out to?
Sure. I don't know if my friends, so I got out of the military and I kind of lost one of my biggest regrets is I didn't keep in touch with anybody. And a couple I I went back to Afghanistan as a contractor, and I ran into one of my buddies over there that I was in the army with, and we kind of stayed in touch. And his wife, about a year ago, made me get a Facebook page because she said the whole unit been looking for me for like the last 20 years or whatever. So I said, okay. So I started up a Facebook page, and now I'm in touch with a lot of my army friends. So I don't know how many of them might search us out. I know my girlfriend's very interested, so I'd like to say hi to Zuli. Love you, babe. I know she'll be watching this. Hopefully, my sisters will watch this, and maybe my mom. You
Hmm.
know, anybody that watches this, to all my fellow veterans, nothing but love and respect. Appreciate you all. If you need anything, call me.
Well, Pete, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day. I got this thing popping up on my screen here, say we're running out of time. Hopefully, it doesn't show up on the video. I don't think it's going to, but
I
it,
don't see it.
yeah. So listen, thank you, and I'm sure everyone watching this is going to say thank you for your service. Thank you for everything that you've done, for the citizens of the United States. And yeah, man, can't thank you enough.
God bless the U.S. Go Birds. Go Phils.
Pete, take care. Nice chatting.
Take care, guys. See you.